Funding for the Maddy Report is made possible by grants from the California Emerging Technology Fund, leaders in the quest for digital equity. The James Irvine Foundation, committed to a California where all low-income workers have the power to advance economically. Fresno State Associated Students, Inc., students serving students. BNSF Railway, moving our economy for 160 years. And The Wonderful Company. The Maddy Report is also made possible thanks to contributions from Harris Ranch Inn and Restaurant and E&J Gallo Winery. From the Maddy Institute, the Public Policy Institute for the Valley's 4 public universities, this is the Maddy Report with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Mark Keppler.
Welcome. Safety net programs really include a variety of government programs that attempt to keep the poor and vulnerable out of poverty. In a way, they're meant to be temporary. They're trying to help people get back on their feet and give them a basic standard of living during that time. One of the most impactful is a federally funded program known as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Many of us probably know it by another name, and that is food stamps. In California, that program is administered by something called CalFresh. How effective is this specific program in keeping people out of poverty, and are there ways to make it more effective? Our guests today recently examined those issues, and they're with the Non-Partisan Public Policy Institute of California. They are Caroline Danielson. She's the Interim VP of Research and Senior Fellow there, as well as Tess Thorman. She's a research associate who is an expert in poverty and social safety net programs. Welcome, both of you, to the Maddy Report.
Thank you.
Great. So let me get started. Caroline, I'll start with you first. Can you give us a brief overview of CalFresh? I mean, what is it? Who's eligible?
Sure. So CalFresh is a program that's intended to provide low-income Californians with money to purchase food with few restrictions. So they must be groceries. Seeds for growing food are also included. And for some special populations who have limited access to kitchen, there's a restaurant meals program. But it's mainly to purchase groceries. It's been around since the 1970s and is mostly federally funded. It was an outgrowth of President Johnson's War on Poverty, originally designed to prevent hunger, now also to help make a nutritious diet affordable. It's a debit card.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it's a debit card that's loaded monthly, and benefits are about $180 per month per person.
Yeah, and that's why the misnomer of calling it food stamps, it's just kind of the old term that people just remember. They don't think debit card. So that's why I use that term. I hope that's okay. Tess, let me ask you, CalFresh is considered a universal safety net benefit because it doesn't have any restrictions on things like age or family composition or participation in other safety net programs. Now, people are probably wondering, does that mean that undocumented residents in California are eligible for CalFresh benefits?
Right. We say that CalFresh is one of the state's most universal programs in the sense that it's really directed to low-income people, but not targeted to specific groups like families with young children. It is true that you need to be a citizen or in one of a few categories of permanent residence per federal rules to get food assistance. But citizen children who have others in their family who are not eligible for immigration reasons can still receive CalFresh benefits, and about 6% of cases do. That said, the state, California, started a program in the 90s when these federal rules changed in order to give food assistance to immigrants who were newly excluded. And that program has historically been pretty small because it's still focused on people with legal status. So it's about 45,000 people right now. But policy in California is changing, and in 2025, undocumented adults who are 55 and older will be eligible for that program. But those two programs, CFAP, the California Food Assistance Program, and CalFresh, are the same in terms of benefits.
Yeah, and you can see that in other state programs, like with health insurance, where they're expanding to undocumented and trying to cover that group that typically is not getting those benefits. Let me ask you, Caroline, is there any limit on how long someone can receive CalFresh benefits?
So typically not. There are very strict work requirements for certain adults who are not disabled and do not have dependent children. But there are 33 months and 36 unless you're working an average of 20 hours a week. But in reality, those work requirements can be waived. And in California, they are currently waived through October of next year.
Okay, so you can be on for a decent length of time, I suppose. Tess, let me ask you this. How often are participants assessed for eligibility? Because they have to meet certain requirements, like income requirements, things of that nature. And does that lag effect cause any problems?
So most working age participants in CalFresh need to report on their incomes every 6 months, or when income increases really substantially, so it goes above the eligibility limit. People can also have their eligibility reassessed if their incomes decline, and that could potentially increase their benefits, but that's voluntary. Our research and other research indicates that reporting time is a really common time for participants to exit, either because they've become ineligible, their incomes have increased, a mistake happens in the income reporting process, or people are just not interested in going through that re-verification process again. And that's problematic if people are leaving the program while they're still eligible and their family could still use the benefits, which is often the case.
Yeah, I just been wondering that 6 month, every 6 months or so, that would sometimes be a lag effect. Either way, it might affect eligibility. But we'll talk more about that in a moment. We're also going to talk when we come back about, do safety net programs like CalFresh encourage or discourage work? And what does the research actually say on this issue? That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. We're talking with Tess Thorman. She's a research associate with the Non-Partisan Public Policy Institute of California. She's an expert in poverty and social safety net programs. We're talking about CalFresh, which is formerly known by a lot of people as food stamps. That's a program designed to reduce hunger by helping low-income individuals and families purchase groceries. Now, since the 1990s, some low-income adults have faced a work requirement under this program to be eligible. And it might be, I found it kind of surprising when I read your report. You state that, quote, most working age adults who are new to CalFresh have a job at some point before they enroll. It's kind of surprising to me. So what are the statistics and what is the job situation of enrollees, adult enrollees for CalFresh? And by the way, I say adult enrollees because there are a lot of children that are also enrolled in this program as well. And we're focusing on adult enrollees here. So what are the statistics?
That's right. So we find that before the pandemic, 84% of working age adults who are new to CalFresh were employed around the time that they enrolled, and a little bit less, around 2/3, were employed in the period of time before they enrolled. That number is likely a little lower now, since just before the pandemic, California made recipients of cash assistance for seniors and people with disabilities eligible for CalFresh. So the program now includes likely a larger group of working age adults with significant barriers to work. But what we find is that many people have a labor market connection, and it's just characterized by instability. So almost 90% have longer term work at some point, but more than half have short-term work at some point, and those two groups really overlap. And kind of just to underscore that, we find that almost 80% of people have a period of 3 months or more where they have no earnings, and that could be supplemented by earnings from someone else in their family, except that many working age adults new to CalFresh are single. They're on a case by themselves.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising. This program focuses a lot on working age adults. I mean, or people that are in this program. So does CalFresh change a person's employment situation? I mean, once they get food stamps, for lack of a better term, are they likely to quit working because, hey, I got food stamps, I don't need to work anymore? Is that what you find or not?
No, people don't appear to quit working once they start benefits. And in fact, many participants are actually required to register for work and agree that they won't quit a full-time job without good cause. So instead, CalFresh is much more likely to be a response to having lost work or having lost some work hours. And so we find that about 2/3 of working age adults new to CalFresh have a job while they're receiving benefits, which is really similar to the share who are working before they enroll, a really strong majority. And not to say that unemployment doesn't happen while people are receiving benefits. It's definitely common, but the chances of leaving a job are really highest right before people enroll in CalFresh.
Yeah, I mean, in these kinds of jobs, these are the working poor, frankly. So some of their jobs are lower pay and or they're not as stable. So there are some issues there as well with the actual jobs that they're working. Let me ask you this. So your research suggests that there's a link between CalFresh or food stamps and participation and improved connection to the workforce. Like I said, some people are going to find that a little surprising. Why do you think that's happening?
Right. So we see that over the course of participation in CalFresh, 73% of people have a job after they exit of these working age adults new to CalFresh. It's a higher share than before they entered. There's a real reduction in short-term jobs for people who had them before they participated. Earnings increase for people who are relatively well connected, but the outcomes are different for people who leave the program and return in short order and people who are off for a longer period of time. And 60% of people exit and don't return within short order. What this really means is that there's a group of people for whom CalFresh is kind of a temporary support that steps in when resources decline, and then people see an improvement of their economic circumstances. But there's a whole group of people who don't experience the program that way. So people's circumstances really differ, and whether for some people CalFresh is really the step that helps launch them into more stable employment is a good subject for future research.
Yeah, I think it'd be very interesting for folks. There's been some recent debt ceiling. There's a recent debt ceiling agreement that adds unemployment as a goal to the program, expands some of the federal work requirements for older adults. At the same time, it changes some work requirements, waivers for some other groups. What impact is it going to have on Californians?
They waive some requirements for veterans, for people experiencing homelessness, and for former foster youth. As Caroline mentioned before, I think California's had a policy to waive these requirements when possible. So they really haven't been in effect in recent years. And we currently have this waiver through October 2024. So that's the first time that we could see the impacts on Californians. Our research shows that instability is common for all working age adults new to CalFresh, but it's particularly common for those single childless adults who are kind of the target of these requirements, the time limits. So the end of the waiver in 2024 will really show us what that impact will be, and it would likely be larger as the age range extends from 50 up to 54. It's true that the new exemptions could offset that somewhat, and it really remains to be seen how, another feature of the debt ceiling agreement was adding an employment goal to SNAP that isn't currently there. So if there's additional funding or if there are additional requirements that come with that, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I guess we will see. Up next, we're going to talk about how effective CalFresh is in stabilizing family incomes. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. We're rejoined by Caroline Danielson. She is a senior fellow with the Non-Partisan Public Policy Institute of California. We're talking about CalFresh, and we're going to focus the conversation now on how it stabilizes family incomes. So a question I have is, do those who receive CalFresh benefits have income from other sources? For example, what about those who are unemployed but on SSI?
Yeah, so the caseload is diverse. There's about a quarter of the caseload that has income from SSI, and these are adults new to CalFresh have income from SSI. But another quarter have some unemployment insurance benefits, and about 17% have income from CalWorks. And many of these folks also have at least some earnings. So yes, they have multiple sources of income.
Yeah, so they may be getting unemployment compensation or something, but that's not going to be enough to pay the rent and pay for the food, and this helps pay for the food. Obviously, while they're looking for a job, that's the idea behind unemployment compensation. So let me ask you this. So how stable are the incomes of CalFresh recipients before they receive CalFresh benefits? I mean, do they experience periods of no earnings or no income?
Yes, they do. So about half have at least one period of no earnings in the year and a half before starting CalFresh. And about half also have a period where they actually have no sources of income that we at least can see in our data. And so income instability is really common. Once we look at the about 3 years of data for these adults, nearly 4 in 10 experience both large negative and large positive change of 25% or more in their incomes from quarter to quarter. So instability is common.
Yeah, the job instability thing keeps rearing its head, it seems like, because these jobs are, they're lower wage jobs, minimum wage jobs. A lot of these people are working they're working, but they're just not making a lot of money. Let me ask you this. You seem to find, when I'm reading your report, you seem to find that, not surprisingly, that federal and state safety net programs boost average earnings. So programs like CalFresh actually boost, incomes. Can you give us some of the numbers?
Sure. So we include CalFresh as a source of income. That might be a little surprising, but since it can help people buy a necessity, that's food, we think it's legitimate to include it. In fact, we include it in our poverty measure research as well. And we find that without CalFresh, if we're just looking at earnings, we'd find that people are under the poverty line, about 88% of the poverty line. But once we incorporate CalFresh benefits for these CalFresh participants, we find that their incomes approach the poverty line. So it really does help.
I also read in your report, and it kind of puzzled me. I wonder if you could help clarify this for me. There's a statement in your report that says that, quote, many adults see a large income drop 6 months after CalFresh enrollment. I would think it would go up. Can you explain?
Sure. So this is related to the 6-month reporting requirement that Tess mentioned earlier. So obviously the state and we have an interest in tracking incomes for folks to make sure that they're still eligible for the program. But that 6-month reporting point is a barrier for a lot of people, and that results in dropping off of CalFresh. And because CalFresh is an important income support, it leads to lower incomes.
What about, so let's talk about after leaving CalFresh. How does income change for participants after leaving? Do their earnings go up, go down? Do they stay the same? What?
Well, if someone is leaving CalFresh because they remain eligible, but they're not filling out the required paperwork due to a barrier or that means they drop off the program, then we see that incomes tend to go down. And there may be ways that we can automate income reporting to do a better job of ensuring that when people remain eligible, they actually stay on CalFresh and get those.
Wait a minute. You just said automating the way they do this. Given California's experience with IT, I would be very careful, I guess, in that regard. They've had some issues there. I mean, let me ask you this. We've got about a minute left, but I want to ask you this. What about the pandemic? What impact did safety net programs like CalFresh have on income for families during the pandemic?
So the federal and state governments took a variety of approaches to expanding safety net programs temporarily during the pandemic. CalFresh, there were what was called emergency allotments to expand benefits, and they really did increase the amount of benefits flowing to families. Those benefits expired in April of 2023 with the end of the public health emergency.
And you're seeing a lot of these benefits that were extended during COVID are now they're being cut, and so now you're seeing an increase in poverty rates as a result. It's just interesting. Anyway, up next, we're going to see how CalFresh can actually be a more effective program. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. We're talking with the PPIC's Senior Fellow Caroline Danielson, and we're being rejoined by her colleague Tess Thorman. She studies poverty and social safety net programs. So, Caroline, I want to ask you, I was wondering about the role of family arrangements, single, married, et cetera, demographics and geography, what they play when it comes to the impact of CalFresh. For example, how do you compare a single person living in Fresno versus, a family member, living in Los Angeles?
Sure. Well, in our specific research on CalFresh, we tend to find that the biggest differences are for single adult cases as opposed to cases with children. And that matters much more consistently for unemployment and instability and income instability than other kinds of characteristics that really stands out. We'll also say, though, that the poverty line is really kind of different if you live in a higher cost part of the state versus a lower cost. So it can make it more difficult to qualify for CalFresh just because wages are higher, employment opportunities are better. And so you may still be struggling to make ends meet in a coastal area, but have less ability to qualify for CalFresh. Yeah,
but I got to tell you, California is expensive pretty much everywhere these days. This isn't like Nebraska. It does. I mean, these programs are very impactful for some folks. Tess, let me ask you, your PPIC report has made some recommendations on ways to improve CalFresh. One area of concern is this whole issue of income eligibility. Can you elaborate?
Sure. So this is about our finding that for people who return to CalFresh after a few months, not within a couple of months, but after a time off, they are experiencing more job instability than people who exited kind of for the long term. And so for this group, CalFresh would play more of a stabilizing role if it continued throughout that time period. Of course, this is complicated because some people are exiting because they have a new job or their incomes are higher, they had more hours at work, and they're no longer eligible. But there are also people who stayed eligible but just fell off the program. In order for people who were exiting CalFresh with a job and then experiencing new instability to stay on the program and to stay connected, the federal government would essentially have to change income eligibility at the reporting time or to create some kind of transitional time period while people are exiting.
Okay. Caroline, by the way, I wanted to just kind of follow up on your point about basically single adults versus families, individual families. I mean, I'm guessing here, but is that because it's more of a commitment? Hey, I want to make sure my family is fed, so I stay on this program. Why is the difference there between families and individuals? Is it because of this responsibility of dependence?
I will say that a limitation of our research is we're looking at really detailed administrative data, but it only goes so far. So we don't understand exactly the reasons. I think one reason that we surmise is the case is that single adults have less connection to the safety net in general. They're more likely to be ineligible for programs that can help them.
Yeah. There's a lot of programs that they're not even eligible for. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so the CalFresh is just one of those programs that is pretty
You
universally
figure I'm not eligible
accessible.
for anything, so why even bother to apply for CalFresh maybe or something? But let me ask you this, Caroline. There's an issue was in your report called churn, and that's people going on and off CalFresh. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What's the problem? How can it be solved?
Yeah, so this is the phenomenon of leaving while you remain eligible and going back on within 1 to 3 months. And it's a problem for families who are, or individuals who are then experiencing instability because they've lost that benefit, that food benefit that can help them smooth their incomes, help them afford a nutritious diet. It also is costly for governments who have to re-enroll folks when they go back to try to get those benefits. So it's kind of a lose-lose for both. And one thing that we saw during the pandemic is this increase in benefits that we're looking into now in our research, because there may be some important lessons learned from the pandemic about reducing churn, and that's a current area of research for us.
Yeah. The pandemic did a lot more than just to teach us how to use Zoom, for sure. There's a lot of things we can learn from it. Let me ask you this, Tess. I'm just wondering, you suggest in your report there's ways to be more responsive to the fact that a lot of the people in this program are working age adults. What are the kinds of things that the program could do to be more responsive to that clientele?
Right. Specifically, since we're seeing that a substantial share of working age adults in CalFresh are in fact working while getting benefits, it's really important for the program to accommodate those schedules and not get in the way of a work schedule. So for example, participants need to call the county for interviews to get or to keep benefits, and if they have questions. And so, flexibility in the hours that those call centers are open to make sure that they have availability outside regular work hours would be helpful, or additional online self-service options, things that would make it easier for working participants to keep up with reporting requirements.
Yes, they're recipients and their client. You have to be responsive to their needs. Well, I want to thank our guests from the Nonpartisan Public Policy Institute for joining us, Caroline Danielson and Tess Thorman. If you want to stay current on state and local politics, you can check out our website at maddyinstitute.com. This is Mark Keppler for the Maddy Report. Thanks for joining us. The views expressed in the Maddy Report are those of the individuals participating in the program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Maddy Institute. If you'd like to share your thoughts about today's episode of the Maddy Report, please visit our website at maddyinstitute.org.